Hey everybody, Aaron Spank here with video number 1 of 2021. Today I want to talk about, or do a lesson about, the rhythm scale, or rhythm and meter basically. But the rhythm scale is a term and a concept that I first heard from a book by Mark Atkinson called The Unreal Drum Book, which is based on the Randy Waldman record Unreal, which has Vinny Colaiuta drumming on it. It's a whole bunch of transcriptions from the book, or from the CD that are put in the book. But the biggest part about it is that there's a breakdown of a lot of different conceptual ideas that Vinny probably uses and practices that would help anybody that's learning the solos or learning the transcriptions to better perform them and better understand them. And one of those concepts is the rhythm scale. Some other books that really dive into this concept to somewhat of a degree are Rhythm and Meter Patterns by Gary Chafee. And kind of subsequently with that book, also Odd Time Stickings for me is one of those books that really kind of goes hand in hand with the Rhythm and Meter book. So those are two recommendations that I have, and sort of, kind of with what I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to be taking a lot out of what those books kind of talk about, and I'm going to apply it to what I'm doing today. So let's get started and break this stuff down. So what is the rhythm scale? So for anybody who's not familiar with it, the rhythm scale is basically a list of the different patterns or subdivided notes that I can play evenly over one beat of time. So, and we're going to do this in 4/4. This is probably the best and most comfortable way to do it. But by doing it in 4/4, we're starting out with just a 1-for-1 ratio, or just one quarter note per beat. That's basically it. So 1-for-1. Then we're moving down to eighth notes, so 2-for-1, 2 evenly spread notes in the space of one beat. Eighth note triplets, so 3. 16th notes are 4. Quintuplets 5. Sextuplets 6. Septuplets groups of 7, and 32nd notes are our groups of 8. A lot of you who have already maybe worked on something similar to this probably have skipped the 5s and the 7s. So even going back to when I was younger, I used to always work on quarter notes, eighth notes, eighth note triplets, 16th notes, skip right over to sextuplets, and then skip right over to 32nd notes, and essentially not work on quintuplets or septuplets. So these have always been the harder, I think, for not only myself as I was developing in my younger days, but for a lot of other musicians as well. I want to focus mostly on these ones today in terms of what I'm going to be breaking down for the video, but just so you're familiar with it, this is the rhythm scale. And what I'm going to do next is perform this entire rhythm scale, as I think a lot of drummers are apt to do, is to perform it as just single strokes, playing with the click, running it through from the very top, quarter notes, eighth note triplets, all the way down to our 32nd notes, and then backwards to the quarter note. So this is the rhythm scale performed with all single strokes, starting at quarter notes, going down to 32nd notes, back to quarter notes, all at 60 beats per minute. 3, 4. So performing the rhythm scale in this fashion that I just did, playing single strokes all the way through with the metronome, that's pretty status quo. Pretty much that's the norm for practicing this sort of thing. And I highly do recommend practicing it this way. One of the big benefits of doing it is just getting used to the different subdivisions without having any complexity thrown in other than trying to feel the change from one subdivision to another. The other aspect is that by playing it this way with the metronome, you can gauge whether or not it's going to be too difficult or not difficult enough depending on your overall tempo. So for example, I did this at 60. I think that's actually a pretty moderate tempo to do it at, where it's not too hard, not too difficult, not overly easy. But in some cases, you'll notice that actually speeding up will make some of these subdivisions easier to perform. And actually going slower will make them even harder because the space between each of your quarter note beats is stretched out so much more that it takes a lot more concentration to understand how you're supposed to stretch those beats out in time. So do practice it this way, but what I want to focus on here is a couple of different methods in which to get not only comfortable with the overall rhythm scale, but some of those trouble spots like quintuplets and septuplets. So what are some ways that we can start to work on different aspects of the rhythm scale to not only get more comfortable with the overall transitions between the different subdivisions we have, but how can we work on just improving some of those different ones that maybe you're having some of a harder time with? One of those ways is just isolate and repeat. So let's say you were working on quintuplets. I would put the metronome on and I would just feel where the stretching out of those beats would be. One big recommendation I have is also counting. A lot of our basic earlier subdivisions, such as quarters, eighths, eighth note triplets, and sixteenths, we have very generic and pretty universal ways of counting, especially in the Western world. You can use other variations of that. So for example, 16th notes, instead of going 1 E and 2 E and you could use Indian tabla phrasing, takidina, takidina. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do it, basically whatever works, but always do it with the metronome so you can hear how it's going to be played with that and basically knowing if it's stretched out evenly in time or not. But using quintuplets as an example of that, one phrase or one way of counting this stuff that I learned is just taking a word that has the same amount of syllables as that particular phrase that you're playing. So five syllable word that I could use for quintuplets, university. So that's one way that you can play it. So isolate and repeat, 60 beats a minute on the metronome. And I recommend start out with your counting. So university, 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 university. So by using your voice to emulate what it is you're about to play will make it that much easier for you to actually perform it. So one saying that you could take from that is, if you can say it, you can play it. Another way is, instead of repeating the entire subdivision throughout the bar, just do it in blocks. So for example, one way I'm going to do it here, I'm going to start out with a quintuplet on the first beat, quarter note on beat 2, quintuplet grouping on beat 3, quarter note on beat 4. And you can flip that too if you want. You could start with your quarter note, so on beat 1, quintuplet grouping on beat 2, quarter note on beat 3, quintuplet grouping on beat 4. So I'm going to start it out with the quintuplets first. So 2, 3, 4. So university, 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 university. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, you can flip it. So 3, 4, university. And you can do the same with a lot of the different groups. Again, I'm just using quintuplets as an example, but this is one way that you can take this and apply it in different ways that will basically improve your chances of understanding the feel and getting a more even spread of those notes throughout the beat. Now, learning the overall phrases, I think, is actually a fairly simple concept. It's not easy, but it's a simple one. Once you understand how the concept works of the entire rhythm scale, it's pretty easy to basically understand its application. And what I think is something that can get overlooked is how we can take very common types of patterns and phrases that we already probably know and can already play in a lot of different situations on the kit or musically, just in any fashion, we can take and we can automatically apply to this to make it much more easy to understand. And what I mean by this is that, in a lot of cases, drummers, or even me, when I first started learning this, I would just learn the rhythm scale and just the patterns of the rhythm scale, and that's it. But being able to apply off-the-cuff quintuplet groupings, like in an actual quintuplet or septuplets, some of those, phrases were very jarring and very, it's very sudden to all of a sudden be able to try to just do it on the spot. So what I want to try to do here is just relate a couple of different ways that you can start to learn these phrases in a more natural setting on the drums in relation to other things that you've done before. Case in point, with rudiments and different phrases such as that. So we're just going to start out extremely simple on this. We're going to start out with 16th notes. Subdivision, I think everybody can probably understand. 60 beats per minute on the metronome again. And I'm just going to start out doing it in single strokes on the pad, and then I'm going to change up the stickings to show some different variations of what you can try to use as well, just to keep the evenly spread out notes within whatever subdivision you're working on. So let's try it out. So 16th notes starting out in singles. 3 E and a 4 E and a. So if we can do something like what we just did there with 16th notes, we can do that with theoretically any subdivision we want, as long as we're picking phrases and sticking patterns that evenly fit within the rhythm scale subdivision that we're picking. So let's start talking about some of the more difficult ones like quintuplets. And one of the first patterns that comes to mind for me is a 5-stroke roll. Now, normally drummers, when they're learning rudiments from the beginning, we tend to learn the 5-stroke roll in two different ways. We learn it as a duple meter phrase or a triple meter phrase. I'm going to quickly run through what those mean for anybody who doesn't, just so they get an understanding of it. And then once we have that, it will make it a lot easier to learn how we're going to play it within the style for the quintuplet. So to start with the 5-stroke roll, duple meter would just mean that we're taking our pattern and playing it subdivided over 2 eighth note values. So 3 and 4 and. So the 5-stroke roll in this case being duple meter is because I'm going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The right, left, left, or my double stroke rolls are played on 30-second notes within the span of 1 eighth note, and I land with my final 5th stroke on the 2nd eighth note. So 1 and 2 and. That would be duple meter. Triple meter is basically where our underlying subdivision would be based on either triplets or sextuplets or some sort of variation of a group of 3. So if I did that on 60 beats per minute, I have to just subdivide triplets. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and a, 2 and a, 3 and a, 4 and a. So these are generally the two different ways that we tend to learn the 5-stroke roll. Well, then I've now thrown a third one into the mix, which is rhythm scale variation. And all that means is what I'm doing is taking that same pattern. Doesn't matter if it's the duple, doesn't matter if it's the triple. I'm just taking the same sticking of right, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, right, left, and I'm evenly spreading it out over the quintuplet phrase. One way to do this is actually probably easier to flip your pattern. Start with your accent first and then the rolls after. A lot of traditional rudiments, especially in more military and second or field snare drumming, will have the rudiments listed, like your roll rudiments will be listed with your rolls first. So you're always rolling into the accent. Well, for this, it's going to be easier if we start with the accent first. So just to get a gist of it, I'm going to start out by playing 5-stroke roll backwards in triple meter, and I'm going to switch it into the quintuplet, and I want you to really hear how I just stretch that pattern out. 2, 3 and a, 4 and a. So all I did there was just take the pattern and just stretch it out. Sometimes when you're first doing this, it takes a little bit of time to get used to the feel of going from one to the other. And if that's the case, just try to learn that pattern by itself. Again, isolate and repeat. So if I did that with the metronome, it would sound like this. 2, university, 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 university. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And once you really got that down, or a little bit more comfortable, you can start to now cycle through a lot of the different variations of groups of 5s that you might also know that maybe aren't necessarily rudiments. So I'm going to do a little bit of that for you now, just so you can see what's possible. And once you've got a better understanding of how different phrases fit into your different subdivisions on the rhythm scale, it's so much easier to start to go between them, or in other words, transition from one to the other. So I'm going to do a quick performance of the rhythm scale for you, which uses just single strokes on quarter notes, eighth notes on doubles, eighth note triplets with right, left, left, or a 3-stroke, single paradiddles on 16ths, quintuplets with 5-stroke rolls, paradiddle diddle on sextuplets, 7-stroke roll for septuplets, and then 30-second notes with a paradiddle diddle diddle pattern. So right, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, and then flipping into the second half. And with that, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you really enjoy this, click like, subscribe for more videos that are going to be coming up, and a lot of my past videos that I've done before this. If you'd like a copy of the PDF that I have for this video, it's a 6-page PDF which has basic outline of the rhythm scale in it, plus a couple different variations on it, as well as a lot of the different phrases that you can use per grouping. You can email me at aaronspinkdrums@gmail.com. Copies are only 99 cents US. And other than that, stay tuned for more, and hope everybody is enjoying their 2021. See you soon.